You're listening to WPVM LP in Asheville, North Carolina, 1037 on your dial, and globally at WPVMFM.org. That's Queen Bee and the Honey Lovers. It's Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and if you're listening to Queen Bee singing Asheville, then you know it's time for Storyville. Folks, today is going to be such a fun show. I want to introduce to you my special funny guest, Andy Offutt Irwin. With a manic, silly putty voice, astonishing mouth noises, and heart-filled stories, Andy Offutt Irwin is equal parts mischievous schoolboy and the Marx Brothers, peppered with a touch of the Southern balladeer. Andy has been a featured storyteller at the International Storytelling Festival 10 times. He's a perpetual favorite at the International Storytelling Center Teller in Residence series. And he's a storyteller, a theater director, singer-songwriter, and, get this folks, a Shakespearean actor. Andy was artist in residence at Emory University's Oxford College from 91 to 2007. He's performed at the LaGuardia High School of Performing Arts in New York, the Library of Congress, Walt Disney World, and a whole mess of theaters, colleges, universities, and festivals all over the United States. Andy lives in Covington, Georgia. And folks, finally, Andy thinks he's funny. And I'll bet you at the end of this hour, you will have to agree. Welcome aboard, Andy.
Thank you, Chuck. It's wonderful to be with you this morning.
Well, now you mentioned a couple things that really got to my heart. You mentioned the New York School for the High School for the Creative and Performing Arts. My son went to SCPA, School for Creative and Performing Arts in Cincinnati. What a joy those schools were. The talent of those kids, the inspiration of those kids. How was it for you?
I was expecting to be like the TV show and/or movie Fame. That would be like, you don't understand me, man. But it was nothing like that. They were wonderful, hungry kids, hungry to learn, crazy respectful. Came in from the outer boroughs, some of them from like Staten Island even, and get up at 3 a.m. to come all the way into the city, into the to Manhattan, I was working with a fellow named Jerry Ulrich, who is the choir director there, chorus director, and teaching storytelling, storycraft, and songwriting. And it was
Andy, may I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
Would you come a little closer to the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Or project a little louder? I can't.
I will do that. Oh, yeah, that's all right.
But experienced actor to project more.
I know, you would think. Is that better?
Yes, much better. But you were talking about the music teacher.
Oh, but yeah, Jerry Ulrich is his name. He is now at the Lovett School in Atlanta and teaching. He's the choral director at Georgia Tech. So wherever Jerry goes, I have work. But it was an amazing time in the middle 90s, middle aughts, 2000 aughts. What year is this? What decade is this? I don't know.
Plus a lot.
Right.
Well, I have to ask you this. You're so much fun as a storyteller. How'd you get started storytelling?
I've always been in some sort of show business really all my life, but in my adult life, I started out at Walt Disney World at Epcot through a company called SAC Theater, and that was slap full-blown comedy. We're doing street theater, Commedia dell'arte at United Kingdom. I ended up directing and writing shows, convention shows. And I just, I was interested in more ideas than just set up and punch comedy. I learned a lot there, some wonderful people. And then I was doing the singer-songwriter circuit. I was playing at Eddie's Attic in Atlanta, which is a songwriter room. And Carmen Dede was there, and I had known Carmen for years, and she's a fairly well-known children's book author with Peachtree Press and Scholastic. And she came up to me and she says, "Grace said," I said, "Thank you." She said, and my song introductions were 10 minutes for a 3-minute song. And she said, "You're a storyteller." I said, "Thank you." She said, "There's a circuit." I said, "Yeah, I heard about that." And She invited me to split a set with her at the 14th Street Playhouse in Atlanta, which is under the auspices of the Alliance Theater, and it went really well. And I left my guitar at home for that one, just to prove that I could do it, and been kind of just doing that ever since. And Carmen sort of pushed me into the Jonesboro network, and '05 was my first national festival. So at 47, I got a career.
So you started storytelling at 47.
That's right. My,
And
really. The National Storytelling Festival where I performed was my third storytelling festival I had ever seen. It was a little bit insane.
you mentioned also a combination of the arts. I always find storytelling to be like a combination of theater and acting, and in your case, music, and not my case, the tile falls off the wall in the bathroom. But you bring all this talent together, and that's the beauty of storytelling. And you mentioned one other thing that I'm going to allude to: community. We as storytellers are big on building community.
The and I tell people all the time, and Michael Reno Harrell once said, and Michael has gold records on his wall. He has famousy people who have performed his songs in Nash Vegas and stuff. And he said, only nice people in storytelling, because we the ones we don't like out. So so there's this there is it's a community between the performers and the presenters, between the performers and the audience. I learned early on. I remember I was playing his third or fourth gig after the first national. I was with Catherine Tucker Wyndham, who was still on the road at 92. We didn't know she was going to die. I was like, what? I could still puddle up. Like, she was so vital that, I'm old. But we were at the Tivoli Theater, and I was walking out on stage like I know how to do, and said, I need an SF58 on a boom stand. I need a DI from my microphone, a 57 if you got it, medium monitors, and darken the house. And she said, we don't have a dark house. We have the lights on so we can see the people. And I learned that, man. You see the audience, which I wasn't used to, but that's because we're putting the pictures into people's minds, and we need to see that electric reaction. And there's no other kind of theater like that.
And speaking of theater and electric reaction, you performed for both adults, or at least people that say we're over age 18.
Right.
We may not act like adults, but you perform for adults and children. Which do you prefer, adults or kids?
I love that question. Here's the secret. Write this down. I want this on a quote card, that you can buy at Target. The secret is this. The secret is to treat children with the respect you give adults, and to treat grown-ups with the exuberance that children crave. I love it when the children and the grown-ups are in the same room. So if I do a family show, and say I'm in a library and playing for a couple hundred people in a library or a library auditorium, and the adults think they need to be in the back and the kids in the front. I want the kids and the adults together so I can make fun of the adults in front of the kids, and the kids can look up at the adults and point and laugh, and vice versa. So I love performing for children. This is a brag. Barbara McBride Smith said that I am Mr. Rogers on steroids, which... it's one of those reviews. I went, I like that one. So, yeah, in equal measure. I mean, yes, I have grown-up ideas that I like to convey, but I like performing for kids a lot.
Well, I think it was one of my previous guests. I think it was Tim Lowry. I may be wrong on spotting the right teller, but his line about working with kids was great. He says, every now and then, if you just use the word "but,"
yeah,
you get them laughing, and then you have them in your hands. I'm sure it wasn't but underwear.
Underwear. Yes. Underwear is the word, but it's going to get you fired. Underwear, though, has some innocence to it.
We're just not going to have that body part mentioned in our program. We just did not think it was appropriate for you to be doing that.
And I also make sure I teach all the children the word scatological. I always have vocabulary words throughout my show, and one of them is scat. I say, see that, and like, may I play my guitar and show you what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So like, there's one. one tune to do, and I'll just go. And then scat sing. And then go to. I don't know how it sounds, but if I do that through a PA, it works. And then I'll go skeet, scat, scooch, skit, pat, scatological. And when I do that, and I'll say that's a vocabulary word. Look it up. You'll be glad you did. And some of the kids are pulling out their phones and trying, going through the thesaurus as I perform. I'm kidding. I forgot what question you asked.
Do you enjoy kids or adults? That was way.
Yeah. See, there it goes.
But I can update that question just by asking you, why fiction? You seem to enjoy fiction more than the personal narrative.
Fiction gives, and here's, if you're a deep fan of mine, Marguerite is a fictional character. And her voice is my grandmother's. But fiction, I can see anything in the world that I want to talk about. It can be about, as I like to say, racism, sexism, or unrequited love, or an issue within our time, and I can assign it to Marguerite or one of her characters, and she can talk about it. And anything Andy sees out in the world, we can talk about. And if I say it, and Andy doesn't say it, he's like a puppeteer. And he can get away with anything because everybody loves you, Aunt Marguerite. Not everybody trusts Andy.
If only you could do voices.
Thank you. Well, that's one of the reasons. And I'm that kid, and there's some other Beth. Oh gosh, Beth. I'll have. I'm forgetting a last name. Beth's last name. But we talked about once. We were those kids that I'd go out in the world, and my mom would say, "Did you have a good time?" And I would say yes. One time when I was a Cub Scout, we visited an old grist mill, which became a restaurant. On Henderson Mill Road, and it was the Henderson Mill. That's why they called it that. They named the mill after the road, and there was a fake mill wheel, and it was like they had built a new mill wheel. It was a 150-year-old building, and my mama said, "How was it?" I said, "Oh, it was amazing." And then they turned on the water, and the mill, the guy had explained how the mill works, and the stones came down, and they made grits for us, and I left mine, and I was utterly making it up. And then we went to the restaurant, and my mom said, "Andy told me about how you turned on the water the water chute and had the mill going and ground the wheat and the corn." And I've always exaggerated, lied. Always lied. Not even tall tale lied. Just I've always lied. And then like, what? I can do this for a job?
And I was just going to say, yeah, you converted a weakness supposedly into an art form. Congratulations on that. Andy, you mentioned one of my favorite characters, and I know it's one of yours, Aunt Marguerite. Tell us about the formation of Aunt Marguerite, and I'm sure we'll hear more of her voice along the way.
Well, my buddy Lint Hatcher, who is one of the funniest people on the planet who doesn't perform for a living, we were just doing these old lady voices. We were 35, and he was talking about his great grandmother in a nursing home. And she kept going, "You want some of these cookies? I can't eat all these cookies. They keep sending me cookies, and my teeth hurt. I can't work." "Well, honey, I'll be glad to have them, but the sugar gets to me, but I'll give them away." And we're doing it back and forth. And then out of the blue, Lint said, "Did you see Marguerite's gardenias? They're the most beautiful." "Oh, she does have beautiful gardenias." And then we would talk about Marguerite in the third person. And then I just said, "Hey, man, that's such a good name. I'm going to become Marguerite." And I just came up with these little jokes at Eddie's. "My husband, Charles, he passed away a long time ago. We have a his and hers tombstone. That's a better value, and his has his name on it, and the year he died, and it has my name on it. the year I was born, but then there's a 19. My tombstone's got the Y2K. I told my nephew Andy, he thinks he's funny. He said, "Oh, come down, Aunt Marguerite. It's not like it's etched in."
I love Anne Marguerite. Oh,
And that's why I write fiction, because I made that up.
well, you turned again lying into an art form.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's talk about Anne Marguerite and something else you said earlier. That
Hmm.
Aunt Marguerite and her voice gives you an ability to tell very difficult stories, especially now,
Right.
about race relations in the South or the New South. How'd that come about? And can you give us some examples after you explain?
Ooh, examples. Um, uh, Marguerite is a self-possessed, self-professed. I talk for a living. Self-professed recovering racist. Um, Backstory on me: I went to the fourth grade twice. I had loved it so much, and the when I my second year of the fourth grade is about the time they integrated the schools. That they closed the old black elementary school because somebody caught it on fire, and that's another story. And when all the black kids came over, and this is our town is about 46% African American. Um, they tracked us into 5 groups. I'm looking at my hand in the camera. So if you're in group 5, you already have your application to MIT. If you're in group 4, you're going to go to University of Georgia. Go Dogs. If you're in group 3, you're probably going to work with skills with your hands, like a mechanic said. That's tore up. And then groups 2 and 1 were mostly all African American kids, and I was in group 2. So my friends from the fourth grade on, most of my friends in elementary school at that time were black, and now they're black adults. That's the way it works. And I, so I just kind of had this experience that not all white people have in the Deep South. So my first story with Marguerite is called "How Marguerite Became a Recovering Racist at Dr. Terror's House." And my friends Johnny and Kenny are real people. And Kenneth is now, he's Kenneth. He's a United Methodist minister. In the story, I'm giving you away the punchline. It takes me 20 minutes to get there, but they have to sit in the balcony of the movie theater, which was how people were segregated at the picture show. And they're building I-20, and I-20 has all these snakes coming through, and we're watching Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, and this guy comes out, and he was a vaudevillian kind of guy, kind of like a Flannery O'Connor story, but this was real, and he would come and throw rubber snakes out in the audience, and Johnny and Kenny had collected snakes and dump them on the white children. And Marguerite finds out about that, and she says, "Who did that?" And I said, "Johnny and Kenny." "Who are they?" "They were in the balcony." "That's where the colored children sit." "Yes, ma'am." "And they did that to you?" "Yes, ma'am." "That took a lot of preparation. I want to meet these boys." So that's kind of how. It's a better punchline if I actually tell the story, but it takes me 20 minutes to get there. So that it's always been interesting to me. And my mother, who was born in 1923, when Johnny and Kenny and I became friends, she, in fact, invited them over to spend the night at my house. And this is in 1968. And I saw her wheels turning in a different way when I had so many black friends. And then, so she kind of informs Marguerite being a recovering racist, because I adore this group of white people who raised me, and how do we come to terms with their prejudices and still love them. So I give Marguerite to the world. Once again, one of the reasons I write fiction, because she can go through that. And she had a domestic maid, and one of my stories is called Sister True, which I wrote before The Help, because I'm not trying to be a white hero. I'm just trying to write about race from a white perspective, which is different, which is a little bit risky, but I get away with it. And I always check in with black storytellers, Lynn Ford, Charlotte Blake Alston, and then there's some Joyce and Jackie in Atlanta. And I always check in with African American performers and say, "Can I get away with this?" And, I mean, and there's one joke, a beautiful joke. It's an elegant joke, and Charlotte Blake also said, "You can't do that." So I don't, and I don't know if you know. Do you know Charlotte Blake Alston? She's famouser than I am. She's a children's director at the Apollo in New York, and she's the voice artist for all of the Philadelphia Orchestra voiceover people, and she's real smart, and I'm jealous. That was a long answer. I kind of streamed on you. Sorry.
Well, can you give us one of those stories? I'm thinking maybe Sister True.
Sister True. It's a 90-minute story. Sister True. I can give you a synopsis. There's, I'll tell you where it came from. Yeah. My problem is I have too many long things. Sister True it is an aspect of the Deep South. If you're a white guy at my age, I was born in 1957. A goodly number of the white families had a domestic maid, and it's part of my coming to terms with that. And there's a woman named Jackie Howard, whose brother is the district attorney of Fulton County in Atlanta, who's taken on some national fame of his own in the last year and a half. Jackie and her performance partner Joyce are Joyce and Jackie, and they think Sweet Honey on the Rock in the Deep South. Just two women, African American women, and we have toured together, and we were on the road. This is how this story started. This is easier to answer. And Jackie's mother is named Gussie, and we went to Gussie's house. And when Jackie and I were when Joyce and Jackie and I were on the road, it was a split bill. It was Joyce and Jackie and Andy Offutt Irwin, and we were playing in Middle Georgia, and about half of our gigs were in predominantly black churches, AMEs and Missionary Baptists, and once again we're in the. People should just get in the car with us. We're so much more entertaining, and we were traveling around in my 1992 Dodge van, big Dodge van, where I slept at the Renaissance Festival. Another story. And Jackie starts imitating her mother, Gussie, and I'm doing Marguerite, and we're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Well, Gussie had been a domestic maid as well, and that's when I came up with this idea. What if I write a story about Marguerite coming to terms with her domestic maid when her domestic maid dies? And that woman, her name is Trudy, and Sister True is called that because when she's at church, whenever something is true, she laughs. And I knew this from my own experience, that black Southern folks laugh when things are simply true. As Tom Stoppard would say, the sound of comprehension. Tom Stoppard, the English playwright. And boy, I found this recording of Martin Luther King Jr., and not only, you don't hear this a lot, being interviewed by Studs Terkel at the bedside of Mahalia Jackson. And yeah, I know. And Studs says, and Studs Terkel, the very famous, he was Chicago, very Chicago. And if you know the song, the play Working, the big song from that play is James Taylor, Damn This Tragic Damn. You know, this is, and it was never on Broadway, it was off-Broadway play. But he was famous for interviewing just everyday Americans, and he was a big fan of Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahalia Jackson. And he had this big Ravox tape recorder. And we don't know what the conversation was, so he can't pull out his iPhone and just start recording. He has to go to the car, pull it out. It's like 40 pounds. Turn on the microphone, and it just click comes on. And Studs says, "We're here at the bedside of Mahalia Jackson, who's ill, and I'm here with Martin Luther King Jr., winner of the 1964 Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. King, tell me about the adversity laughter of the Negro." Bam. Starts out like that. And King starts saying that some people have the ability to laugh the truth out of folks and then to laugh the truth into them. Truth, Sister True, Trudy. And that's how I came up once again, why I write fiction. And So within that story, and it's a 90-minute theater piece. Within that story, Trudy dies, and Marguerite has lost touch with her because of a lot of white folks did lose touch with their people. But her granddaughter is an OBGYN, and her granddaughter joins Marguerite's hospital. Have I mentioned that Marguerite is a recent medical school graduate and has a hospital in my town? It's an old antebellum house. And the granddaughter joins Marguerite, and she's very suspicious. She is not comfortably just coming into Marguerite, but Marguerite asks for a meeting with her, and they meet at a Starbucks, and Marguerite had never been to a Starbucks, and the menu confused her. She says, I want a small. You want a tall? A small. A tall. A small. Look, tall is small. I'm so confused. So anyway, that's a synopsis, and there's a happy ending, and everybody watches television together and has parties, and there's some of the yeah, that's enough. I'm sorry. That's kind of how it works. And when I did it first, I did it for the first time. And I have to say this: I did it in 2008. The Help was published in 2009. I performed it in 2008, and Lynn Ford, who's Afro-Latin, you heard me, from Ohio, she actually stood on stage with me. She was the voice and character of Sister True, and Jackie was there, and she was the voice and character of Gussie Gilstrap. And so I had those two African American women with me on stage, and then Len said, you can do this without us. And I said, do I have permission? And she said, yes. And so that's why I always check in with African American storytellers when I'm coming up with new material, just to make sure that as a white ally, I'm not overstepping my bounds and trying to be some white savior or some such nonsense. It's more than you bargained for, ain't it, boy?
Nice description. And now that leads me into our ever popular station ID, where we say you're listening to WPVM FM 1037 in Asheville and globally at WPVMFM.org. And folks, if I may, just a little bit about our station. We're not public radio, we're community radio. And that one of the big differences is we do not have pledge campaigns. So I would ask you, if you're listening and enjoying this show, please go to WPVMFM.org, hit that donate button, and help us out. And with that, Andy, it's back to you.
Thank you, WPVM Asheville. I wanted to be that little, radio chorus. Always wanted that job. That really stacked 6-part harmony.
Well, now that we're working through that, and you said you are funny, what's the difference between being a humorist and being a comedian?
Wow. A humorist writes funny. A comedian talks funny. The other thing is a humorist. I have done stand-up. I actually won an award at the Jerry Farber Invitational at the Punchline in Atlanta, which was a big surprise. I won that night. I won a contest. But when you're doing stand-up, someone's in the back with a number clicker. They're literally clicking laughs per minute. And the humorist uses humor for more serious business. I always go to Mark Twain's Huck Finn, which at the beginning of the book, he says, there's nothing important going on here. The introduction to the book is, I'm not trying to tell you anything. And it always makes me cry. Only a humorist can write a line such as, when Huck steals Jim, the enslaved man, and Huck's faith, his Christian faith, is absolute. He has no doubt. He has a simple child's faith. And he knows that if he sins, he'll go to hell. And he knows that stealing is a sin. And only a humorist can write Huck just going, well then, I'll go to hell. A humorist can use wit to a point where he can make a point. The other difference between a humorist and a comedian is a humorist storyteller isn't getting rated for laughs per minute, and there isn't a 3-drink minimum.
Well, it's when I think of a humorist, frankly, I think of Will Rogers.
Yeah.
Of a comedian, I'm thinking Richard Pryor and so many comedians like him. And you're right. One, Will Rogers for me is so inspirational, and through his lightheartedness, the messages actually resonate to me more deeply.
Yeah, I love Will Rogers. I had a Will Rogers thing in high school. Um, and for real, it was I wrote this report on Will Rogers when I was a junior, and I went beyond the encyclopedia. Which you had to go into the library. Young people in the old days, you had to go to the library and you had to check out books, and you don't reshelve them. You didn't have your phone with a Wikipedia, um, and just how he used humor. He was, this is scary to say, sort of the Jon Stewart of his generation. I mean, he's sort of, his political humor was nonpartisan, but really smart, really, really smart stuff. And, doing rope tricks, on stage, just a talker. He was one of the first storytelling monologists. He would get on stage with a rope and just talk, not necessarily doing bada bing poomp. He's doing longer narrative stuff. Once again, the difference between a humorist and that's really astute, Chuck. He's making you think, and that's one of the things about storytelling is we're depending on the audience to see some of the pictures that we're forming and to listen to the ideas that we're bringing forth, and the audience knows we're mostly kind people and we have good intentions. Once again, that's one of the differences between some comedians and storytellers. I will say we're living in a kind of a golden age of stand-up. It's so much better than in the 90s and the early aughts when I was doing it, because a lot of it is what I call a lot of comedy, it still is what I call observational contempt, where you observe anything and have contempt for it. You might see a majestic theater koozie and go, oh, it's a koozie. I hope it keeps your beer cold. We don't want your fingers to get chilly. And it's just contemptuous and it's boring. And I love the fact that Henny Youngman, the great joke writer, and don't misunderstand me, if I can have you pull my finger and I make some noise with my body and you laugh, I'm happy. But Henny Youngman, the great joke writer, in his last years, he would go to Dangerfields and he would watch these contemptuous comedians and he'd go, tell a joke. 10 million sperm and you were the fastest. Sorry.
Well, there's another thing. Andy, when you say that you are a liar and now you form that into an art form, you fit into the brand that I describe storytelling. And that brand is we're BSers with an attitude.
That's right. Absolutely. And we're trying to bring about the greater good by lying to you.
But attitude is everything, right?
But attitude is everything. Yes.
Yet another dimension in your performing, and it's another thing I can't do, like singing. I cannot whistle beyond, well, I won't even try. You do that. Can you tell us about your whistling? Can you give some examples? I love your whistling.
I have to switch from coffee to water for that. Whistling was like a language in my house. My father, and we were not close, but my father whistled as much as he talked when I was a kid. So I learned to hear it. And it wasn't until I was around the 5th or 6th grade, I thought everybody in the world could have a tune in their head and have it come out of their lips. I did not know that everybody in the world couldn't whistle. My granddaddy on my mother's side could also whistle. And so it became a thing around the 6th grade, and we would play kickball, and I would whistle really loud the Star Spangled Banner before we played, and people let me do that, which was really loud. I can't do it here. And then it became, in high school, I would whistle Sweet Georgia Brown with the pep band at high school basketball games. And then at Georgia College, the great Mr. Jim Willoughby, who was our band director, who was an alto player by trade. He would pull out his flute, and with the jazz band, we would exchange eights, and I would whistle with him. So it became a thing, and then I just bring it to all my shows. And when I had a band, twice, twice every 3 years, I still have my band. We still gather together for some sort of gig called Andy Offutt Irwin versus the Finger Monsters, and it's I don't have to pay a keyboard player because I whistle a solo. So like Matthew will play a guitar solo, and then TK will play a solo, and then I'll whistle a solo. So it just became this thing that I do.
I know can be really tricky, and you might have to back away from your mic on this.
Yeah.
But can you give us an example of, if I know you tell longer stories, but can you give us a short example of a story with whistling guitar, all of your talents rolled?
A story with whistling? I'll just whistle for you real quick.
Okay.
How's that? Yeah.
Wow, you sound like the songbirds that I'm hearing outside in the springtime now.
Thank you. It's a living.
Do you teach people how to whistle? Can you do
No.
that?
I'm forgetting her name. NPR producer. But she asked me to do a whistling salon at her house in Washington D.C. And she said, I have some people who are interested in learning how to whistle. And I thought, okay, I'll really examine it and talk about embouchure and what goes on inside of my mouth and all of this sort of thing. And it didn't go well. It's one of those. Yeah, it's if you can make a sound. I thought if you can make a sound, I could teach you, but I have tried, and it's excruciating. I can help. I can teach writing a little bit. I can teach songcraft a little bit, but I can't teach whistling. I've tried.
Well, I'm going to ask you. This is putting you on the spot.
I don't care.
But I love your story about Aunt Marguerite and med school. And I know it's a little bit longer. Can you condense that a little maybe and give us about 10 minutes?
Oh, I can do that. Looking at my clock. Oh, well, our husbands have passed on, and we were tired of the bridge club and the garden club. So me and Mary Frances went back to medical school. Now, Mary Frances didn't want to deal with the traffic in Atlanta, so she went to the Georgia College of Medicine in Augusta, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I went to Emory, and we graduated. We opened up a hospital in Covington. It's called Southern White Old Lady Hospital. And we call it that because I told Andy, said, y'all should call it Southern Old Lady Hospital. I said, no, it's called Southern White Old Lady Hospital. And that's because white is the default for white people. Like if they see a white man walking down the street, they'll say a man's walking down the street. But if they see an African-American man walking down the street, they'll say there's a black man walking down the street. So that's why we do that. And that came about because when Mary Frances and I turned 40, and Tootsie and his mother and Joy, we all went to New York City. It was the year we all turned 40, and none of us had ever been north of Virginia. And we drove the whole way, and we drove out of Virginia into Maryland. We went, we're out of the South. And then we went from Maryland to Pennsylvania. That's the Mason-Dixon line. And then we went through the Lincoln Tunnel. It goes under the river, that whole, did you know that? It does. And we did everything in New York that you want to do. We went to Mama Leone's, very famous. It's not there anymore. We went to the Automat, because we thought it'd be fun to have a sandwich out of a P.O. box. It's not there anymore. Aren't you glad we didn't make it to the Statue of Liberty? Anyway, I had tickets for us to see a revival of Man of La Mancha. I was so excited, and that I had to have called on the phone in those days. When the phone was still tied to the kitchen wall, and we were standing in line, and everybody we met in New York, I have to tell you this, Mr. Chuck, everybody we met were kind people, because if you go through the world expecting people to be kind, they'll be kind back at you, and they will, and treat people with kindness. But I have to admit, there was this one lady we met, and she was in the box office, and it's called that because they make them sit in this little glass box. And she was smoking Winston cigarettes. I remember the red crushed pack. She was smoking away, and just in a cloud she could barely see, and her eyes were bloodshot. And I said, I had a younger voice. I said, I have 4 tickets to see this play. And she said,
It's a musical.
oh, I'm sorry. Bless you for telling me. I have 4 tickets to see this play in the name of Van Camp. And she said,
Where are you from?
and I said, we're all from Georgia. And that woman said,
Everybody from Georgia's a bigot.
and I was taken aback, and a synapses fired in my head that had never fired before. And I said, oh, do you mean the white people or everybody? And that's why that hospital's called that.
Wow. You, that's a very, very profound and touching story. And Andy, there's one element in it that I actually experienced, and that's Mama Leone's. I went to school in D.C. at George Washington University, and a friend of mine from New York was married, and the wedding and the reception was at Mama Leone's. And I'm so embarrassed to say this. I got rather drunk and sick at Mama Leone's, and it wasn't a pretty picture. Maybe that's why they closed. I don't know.
Oh man, it broke my heart when I found out it was closed. I was just, and I knew it was like a tourist destination, but it was, and it was a giant side of spaghetti. Whatever you ordered, there'd be a giant side of spaghetti, and it was amazingly good. I think this is because they even put more sugar in the sauce than my mama. I mean, it was crazy. It was so good.
Yeah. Well,
Love that place.
speaking of putting sugar, as a Southerner, sweet tea is so important. And I'm from Cincinnati, which is on that Mason-Dixon line.
Right.
But Yankees don't get it, do they? That there's something special about the sweet tea versus the lemony tea that's not sweet.
We didn't call it sweet tea because sweet was the default. We just called it tea. And my mama, we would go to this place called Henderson's, which was open from 1948 until a couple of years ago. My mama would want unsweetened tea. And now she had been engaged to a man from New York. Ooh, it was during the war, World War II. But so they would have to brew her some tea special because it was just the default. And I don't think it was until Georgia in the South started building industries that people from the North came to the South and they called it sweet tea. We didn't even say sweet tea. It's kind of like the term soul food, which cracks me up. And I was, it sounds like such a white guy thing to say. I had supper with a black couple the other night because, my favorite school friends of school parents of my kids' friends. Anyway, they're really good friends. And we went to a soul food restaurant. And of course I am also, as I say in storytelling and in literature, I'm a trickster. And which means I'm a jerk, but it's literary. And I said, in the history of soul food is that when the great migration of African Americans happened in the early 20th century, and they went up to Detroit, say, and in the Midwest in Detroit, and then soul music started. Their food that they brought with them was associated with soul music and became known as soul food. And when I was a child, soul food was called food.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So anyway,
I'm getting it.
So we went to the soul food restaurant. It was called Soul Food Restaurant in Conyers. And it was cracking me up because the Masters was on the television. I said, I'm in a soul food restaurant and I'm watching golf. What is the deal here? It's a true story. And it was funny. And I razzed the waitress about it, and she gave me more tea anyway. That
Well,
was sweet.
my mother was from your neck of the woods, from Atlanta, and we had tea growing up, and she never called it sweet tea, but there was a lot of sugar in there.
Oh yeah, it was always. I mean, that's the way it comes. You super saturate it, and I remember learning chemistry in high school. They said, and Mr. Rowland said, what we do is you boil it. You can only saturate it so much without boiling it, and then when you boil it, you add more sugar, and that's how we make our tea. I went, there's a science lesson for sweet tea. It's super saturation. Super saturation.
And that lesson in science led you to become an entertainer.
That's right. Because when you do kids shows, you have to write, all the educational components. So I could throw that in. I got to write this down right now. Yes, super saturation, sweet tea. It's
Well,
educational.
something else, Andy, that we have in common, and I think it's important for me to say this and to get it out. Like you, I went to not elementary school, but a high school that was so well balanced in terms of our student population. We were one third white Jewish, one third white Christian, and one third black.
Each of you were. That was the interesting part.
Yeah, we're a very colorful high school. What can I say?
I'm sorry.
But I learned so much outside that classroom about being a human being. And I remember telling a story at my class reunion, 50th class reunion, about 3 years ago. Yeah, I'm 71. And I was relating a story about having a friend come over in the 8th grade to help me write a constitution. We were both on student council. And Reggie was a big black young man. We were in the 8th grade, big guy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks Jews are really rich and all that. We were not wealthy. We had a very small 2-bedroom apartment. Go ahead, be a guest. But Reggie came over, and my mother from Atlanta saw Reggie and took me aside and said, "What's he doing here?" I just said, "Mom, Reggie is my friend. Get used to it. Get over it." And I related that story at the 50th class reunion, and a friend of mine, Sharon, who was black, leaned into my wife and said, "He was always one of the good ones." And I was class president, and that isn't a big deal, but because of that, I wanted to relate to everyone. So after that experience, I still carry this. Of course, we see color. Of course, we see demographic differences, but do we see the human being? And to me, that is the most important thing: is A, shut up and listen, and B, get to know that person that's right in front of you. My wife was a retired professor, and she taught communication, she taught diversity, and the term that she would use is called the contact hypothesis. That's a fancy way of just saying, if you have any bias or prejudice against a group, get to know one person. And getting to know that one person, and getting to know that person deeply, starts to change the brain. And I think our country right now needs a whole lot of contact hypothesis.
We do, and there's a thing. Sometimes, I used to make this argument a lot more than I did 5 years, 6 years ago. But sometimes, I have found, as a professional Southern guy, I mean, being from the deep South is with Marguerite is kind of my job in its own way. And if I'm not working, I know I have soft eyes, and there are a few words like I cannot pronounce the word fire without really, I cannot say fire. So I know I have a Southern accent, but I've had people say, "Oh, you don't sound like you're from the South." I say, "Well, I'm not working yet." But since we've gone through so much of it, sometimes I find parts of the Deep South are pretty tolerant. This is a Carmen Didi anecdote, and I haven't told. I mean, I'm talking out of turn, but she tells this great story. She was in Texas, and she's taken to meet the mayor, and the mayor is a woman, or was born a woman, in a man's suit and man's shoes and a tie, even had cufflinks, short hair, and Margaret and Carmen meets the mayor and welcome to our town. We're so happy to see you. And then Carmen was meeting with her host. She goes, it was really interesting meeting your mayor. You know, she's a woman who dresses like a man. That was just interesting here in Texas. And the woman said, we don't let on. And I love that story because that contact, what I find is there are people who love individuals without loving the group and haven't figured out that yet. They, so it was Carmen who said, well, in the South, we love the individual, we hate the group. I know people who love the group but don't have any connection to the individuals. And I always tell this story. One more of those, if you'll let me. I was in, I'll say the Pacific Northwest. I don't want to say the town. And a woman came up to me and said, "You're from Georgia?" "Yes, ma'am." And see, there it is. She was slightly older than me, and I had to say, "Yes, ma'am." And I saw her go, because that's how I was raised. And now there aren't a lot of people older than me anymore, but I still do it. And I said, "Yeah, I'm from Georgia." She says, "Well, I could never leave. I could never live in Georgia. There's so much racism." And I had looked at this audience, and it was about 300 people in the audience, and there was not a face of color in the room. And once again, I'm a trickster and a jerk. And I said, "Well, you ain't got nothing to worry about because there's no racial diversity here. So you're off the hook." Because, I mean, I had to defend where I'm from. I'm associated lightly with an online magazine called The Bitter Southerner, and which New York Times called the New Yorker of the South, which makes New Yorker the bitter Southerner of the North. And, right. It's always kind of an apologetic thing. But, part of that whole, all the writing element of the Bitter Southerner is we recognize, once again, what the history of the Deep South has been, and we recognize the humanity in each other. And one of the great bumper sticker sayings, which is on my car, which is on a T-shirt my kid wears, is "Abide no hatred." So it brings that Southern flavor to loving diversity. I mean, not just tolerating it, but freaking loving it. And when people can figure that out, they will be happier. I'm getting puddled up. They simply will be happier. Okay.
And your state right now, I think, is leading the march of justice, and
Hope
it's
so.
such a difficult battle because there's still plenty of opposition. But I want to go back to just something that I said, and I have to correct myself. When I told the story of Reggie and my friend at the class reunion, and the kids that I would skip school with, those are just the opinions of one or two people. That's not a free pass. That
Oh
doesn't
no.
give me a
Right.
free pass at all. And I think it's very important. I honestly, Andy, I remember a few years back here in Asheville, there was a program in what was the historically black district of Asheville, which has now
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately been gentrified. And one of the speakers was a young black woman. And after she spoke, and she was angry, I was so moved. And I realized I'm a product of two Southern parents, and one of them was very prejudiced. And we were so poor, but we had a black domestic woman, Christine, who I grew to love. But I admitted to this young woman, and people, when I've told this, they say, "You're so wrong. How can you view yourself this way?" But I went up to her and I said, "I have to admit, I'm a racist." And then I explained, and she just grabbed me and hugged me and said, "I wish more white people would just come to terms with that reality. It's not a blame, it's just a reality that to grow up in this country white, of course you're going to have it's a continuum, but of course some of that is going to be in your history, in your experience, and in my case, in my family.
Right.
So to say I've escaped that sounds nice, and I pretty much believe that I have, but that's not a free pass either. So I think it's really important, just as white people, that we listen, we look, we feel, and we become part of the experience of all people. But anyway, I'm pontificating.
No, that's all right. You pontificate, man. It's your show. You can pontificate all you want. I know you're making tens of dollars.
Not even tens of cents.
Oh no. Community radio. Everybody works for free.
And we love it. We absolutely.
I know you do.
But I want to go back to you because we just have maybe 5 or 6 minutes left. You're a traveling storyteller. What's that like?
Yes, I have been.
Well, you're the wandering minstrel of storytelling. How's it like just traveling around and going
I miss it real hard. I do. I miss traveling because I am a natural vagabond, and I'm more of a Willie Nelson than a there's the whiny road song. I'm on the road and everybody's just tired. I'm on the road again. I like traveling, and that's another thing about the storytelling community is we get to hang out with our friends. I was talking to somebody about Dovey Thomason, who's a Lakota woman for a job, and and I was like, oh yeah, Dovey, we should invite her to this festival. It was once again how we sort of kind of pitch each other. Yeah, Dovey would be a good balance for that bill. Where is she from? Where does she live? I don't know. I couldn't remember where Dovey lives because the last time I saw her was in Sierra Nevada, California, and then I saw her in Farmington, New Mexico, and I couldn't remember where I'd seen her. So I love. I've traveled by myself, where you are kind of in the motel room by yourself. You do the gig and you drive some more or you fly some more. So it's tiring, but you arrive and there's your community. There's some of the best friends I've ever had, which gives me hope because we all have our old high school friends and our old college friends. I have friends that I've made in post middle age. When I was 61, I wrote this thing, like 61 is the 16 of the elderly. You're not really an elderly person, but you can touch it. It's like when you can first drive, you're not an adult, but they let you have that. I can order on the cheap menu at the IHOP. Yes. but it is traveling. Yeah. I had lunch with my great mentor, Susan Merritt, who has been the education director of the Atlanta Symphony, and this is yesterday. And she just rocked back in her chair and she said, so what are you going to do now? And I said, what do you mean? She goes, you can't travel forever. And I said, I don't see why I can't. So I'm going to pull up, Donald Davis just bought himself a new Airstream and a car to pull it with, and he's older than you.
Well, that's really old, man.
But yeah, I like it. I like traveling. My son's in college, so I'm no longer, he no longer Xerox my face and puts it on a milk carton. Deadbeat dad, and and in the summer he's has been on the road with me all summer long in the past, and has come to several gigs as well. So been able to spend time with him actually out in the world, and he loves it. So I like it.
But you can't wait to get back. I want to get back to a mutual friend of ours, Michael Reno Harrell.
Yeah.
I love his song. My wife wanted to play it on my 70th, but it was during COVID, so I didn't have a 70th party. But I love his song. Remind me why I walked in this room.
It's a great
came into this room.
Song. Man, it's a good song. It's the best aging song in the world. And Michael's as good a guy as it come, isn't he? He's just.
He was on the show, and I've seen him perform, but I talked to him as an audience member. But he was so wonderful. And then we also have a mutual friend, David Holt, who was on this show. And David and I are now becoming friends. We're starting a men's group, and I think David is going to be part of this men's group. And again, these are just not only wonderful storytellers like you, but also like you, just amazingly good people.
Yeah, they're fantastic people.
Well, before we wrap it up, tell me what's going on now. What's up next for you?
I will be at the Cookeville, Tennessee Story Fest with the great Minton Sparks.
Yes.
On May the 1th. And that will be live and outside in an open-sided tent, and people can bring their chairs, and it's free. and can sit away from each other. And June the I will be at virtually. I will be at the hold on a minute. Flatwater Tales, under the auspices of Flatwater Tales, which is in Oak.
Andy, let me interrupt for something more important because we're really
Please
short. How do people find out information for those shows?
go to my website, andyirwin.com.
Well, there you go. Andy, I have enjoyed every minute of this. It's so much fun. It's so much fun to see you, talk to you, get to know you a little bit better. Thank you so much. And folks, you've been listening to Storyville on WPVM FM 1037 and globally at WPVMFM.org. Thanks a lot. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, Andy. Love talking.
Thank you so much, Chuck. I enjoyed it so much.
Bye-bye.